And thank you all so much for joining us here today. Let me begin by saying the future of Kentucky's economy is in our classrooms, being taught and cared for by Kentucky's original job creators, our teachers. And this administration knows job creation. With $21 billion in economic investments and 40,000 jobs created in the last 3 years, opportunities abound for Kentuckians like never before. Kentucky's future workforce must be ready to meet this moment, and we must meet them where they are, in our schools. On the heels of the release of the national test scores, we have heard commentary from across the political spectrum about our schools. As the state's highest elected teacher, I believe any policy or funding decision regarding education must pass a three-pronged test. 1, we have to put students first. 2, we must take care of the people who take care of our kids. And finally, we must ensure that our schools have the resources to do what we have asked them to do. In that spirit, Governor Beshear will be announcing our Education First agenda today. We are joined by some of Kentucky's finest educators and lawmakers. And while we are all here today in our professional roles, more importantly, we are parents, grandparents, community members, and taxpayers. So I want to say a special thank you to Kentucky Board of Education Kentucky Board of Education Chair Lou Young, and Jason Glass, our Commissioner of Education, Demetrius Liggins, Superintendent of Fayette County Schools, Representative Rachel Roberts from Northern Kentucky, and Representative Sherilyn Stevenson from Fayette County. We also were supposed to have Representative Killian Timoney join us today, but he has had a family emergency and could not be here, so we wish him and his family the best. But the bottom line is that we all have skin in this game. All of us, elected officials, families, school leaders, and community members, we have a choice to make. We can settle and accept the current circumstances as our new normal. We can armchair quarterback and point fingers, or we can get to work. Governor Beshear and I choose to get to work. This is where our Education First agenda comes in. We are and always will be an Education First administration. And now I will turn it over to Governor Beshear to lay out the components and rationale of our Education First agenda.
Good morning. Today we gather at this state capitol rotunda to talk about a priority for our administration, but a priority for every parent, the education of our children. I appreciate those who are with us here today: Kentucky Education Commissioner Dr. Jason Glass, a native Kentuckian, Kentucky Board Education Chair Dr. Lou Young, Fayette County Superintendent Dr. Demetrius Liggins, Representative Rachel Roberts of Newport, but for that emergency, we would have Representative Timoney here today showing you one Democrat, one Republican. Education isn't red or blue, it's just absolutely necessary for our children. Lieutenant Governor Coleman and I have always run an Education First administration because between us, we are the parents of young children, teenagers, and young adults. And we know the best thing that we can do as leaders in this state is to make sure that every Kentucky child has an opportunity to get a world-class education, every single child. As the dad of a now teenager, and it'll be 2 teenagers just next year, I stay up at night worrying if I'm doing everything I can so that all of Kentucky's children never have to leave this Commonwealth if they don't want to live out all their goals, find their dream job, and ultimately raise their own family right here. We Kentuckians share many values, and being able to keep our family close is one of them. Every one of us knows that our time together is fleeting, especially with our cherished children. That's why I'm calling for action today to support and to do more to support our school-aged children and educators by unveiling this Education First plan and agenda. Just as the World Health Organization is saying the end of the pandemic is in sight, this plan will help us advance student learning after that deadly pandemic. So in many ways, COVID-19 has been our generation's toughest foe. It's taken more than 17,000 Kentucky lives. It's become the third leading cause of death, and it's even shortened the life expectancy of Kentuckians. It's had that major of an impact. Just last week, as I was dedicating new homes built in western Kentucky, I talked to a family and learned of a man that survived that night when none of his home was left standing, only to fall to COVID 1 month later. Brittany and I have personally experienced the loss in this pandemic of people that we love. We've also experienced what it's like to be parents of elementary and middle school students during the pandemic. Other people may talk about it. We as a family have lived through it. We know during the height of the pandemic and through case surges, every state in the country took some action to save lives. According to a report from the Center of American Progress, during the 2019-2020 school year, all public school buildings in the United States closed in response to COVID-19. Schools in 48 states remained closed or offered remote instruction through the end of the year. And through 2021 and 2022 in Kentucky, local school districts had to make the tough decisions to implement remote learning days when it was necessary to prevent further illness and death. Indeed, we lost dozens of educators, even with our actions, along with so many of these children losing their parents, grandparents that may have been raising them, foster parents. Instruction disruptions have persisted across the nation as staff, students, and families became sick and missed school. Through these challenges, though, our educators stood strong. They pushed through something that none of us had ever seen before and that put their health at risk. Yet they showed up, and they did their very best. And Kentucky Students' 2022 National Assessment of Education Progress Performance was found to be consistent with those of the rest of the nation. In order to ensure we're doing everything possible to help every child reach their full potential and rebound, catch up, we must first address our teacher and staff shortages in our schools. It's simple. Folks, you can't catch a child up on math if you don't have a math teacher. Our teacher shortages are the result of not just the pandemic, but years of cutbacks that have left schools underfunded. It's a direct result of the elimination of pensions for new teachers, along with refusals to fund pay raises that are needed. And now, we have nearly 11,000 teacher vacancies across the state. These are teachers, coaches, interventionists who are needed in our classrooms, especially right now. Our schools are the backbones of our community, and our teachers and educators are the foundation of our future. As the Lieutenant Governor says, they are the heroes supporting our kids, fueling our workforce. And if we want to make sure that we catch every child up, but then do so much more than that, we want to truly move ahead and thrive, we have to have enough people in the school buildings with the expertise to make that happen. So, the first part of our Education First plan is providing a 5% across-the-board increase to every teacher, bus driver, cafeteria worker, and school employee of this state. We will be asking for the General Assembly to reopen the budget in this next session to provide that additional raise. And folks, that raise is above and beyond anything our local school districts have done with dollars already provided to them. Even those that were able to do the 5% raise on their own are still not competitive with so many other jobs that are out there. This is going to give us the ability not just to compensate teachers for what they're worth, because they're worth a whole lot more than we pay them, but to make those jobs more competitive for those that are looking. This raise, I will admit, is not new news. We saw this shortage coming, so each budget session I have fought for a raise for our educators, and each year the General Assembly has failed to act in a way that would truly make an impact to address this shortage. What is new news is the recent data, whether vacancy numbers, 11,000 teachers, or test scores, showing that we must act now to have the educators needed for our children. According to the National Education Association, Kentucky now ranks 44th in the nation for starting salaries, with teachers averaging about $37,373 per year. We have dropped 2 spots since last year. That's right. In a competitive job market, we've actually fallen behind. And right now, we're paying our teachers when they start less than many of their students can earn, directly entering the workforce with just that high school education, much less the higher education that we require for our teachers. We need to increase our teacher pay and make sure we pay them what they deserve. And I want to make clear today, this plan we are announcing is something that we can more than afford. Right now, Kentucky has record-setting revenue surpluses, with the revenue trend in this fiscal year running 11% higher than last year and substantially above estimates. The last 2 fiscal years, we've had the largest budget surpluses in Kentucky's history, and the only ones that have ever topped $1 billion. When you combine the strong fiscal management by my administration with the greatest year for economic development we ever had in 2021 and more than 13,200 new jobs announced this year, it is time to move our state forward by making a historic investment in our schools, educators, and our students during this upcoming session. And to be clear, that would be a 5% raise for everybody who works in those buildings, because we have to have the bus drivers, just like we have to have our custodians, just like we have to have those that work in the lunchroom. Each school is that village that wraps their arms around those students, and everyone in that building is critical. Second piece, we are once again calling for a historic investment in the Commonwealth's youngest learners by providing universal preschool for all 4-year-olds and full-day kindergarten for every Kentucky child. It is time. This year's Kentucky report card on kindergarten screening showed 62.7% of Kentucky's children were below average for academic and cognitive abilities. Want to make sure that our reading and our test scores improve? How about ensuring every Kentucky child is kindergarten ready? Making sure we not only end any learning loss by providing this instruction to our youngest learners, but other states have already done this. And to be competitive, we need to be providing the same educational services that our military provides every single family on one of their bases. We know pre-K provides positive outcomes on children's early literacy and math skills, and it fosters long-term educational success. And to become and to stay a top economy in the United States, we have to continue to build a world-class workforce system, and that starts with pre-K. Pre-K is also an effective time and place to screen, test, and identify learning challenges. Imagine early intervention for our youngest children, helping them overcome any obstacles that we can identify at that age. Finally, universal pre-K is the single most effective step we can take to get more people into the workforce and to do it right now. When Washington, D.C. did this 8 to 10 years ago, they increased their maternal workforce by 10% in the very first year. If people want to talk about not enough people being in the workforce, while we have the lowest unemployment rate basically in our history, then removing obstacles is our job, and universal pre-K does just that. Next, like last year, I'll be working with lawmakers to restore funding for professional development, as well as textbooks and instructional resources. You know, right now, our educators are not only having to teach the classes they would normally be teaching for the grade that they teach in, but they're having to catch students up for any learning loss. These professional development dollars will make sure we have the very best training to do both, as well as instructional materials that can directly address any learning loss by providing extra for those children or for those classrooms. If we want to catch everybody up, we got to make sure we fund the materials that will help do that. Next thing we need to do to further keep teachers in the classroom is helping them with loan forgiveness. As I mentioned, our teachers are the 44th lowest paid in the country. And beyond a 4-year degree, they often obtain higher education to advance their careers, and that's something we want to encourage. It's critical because we want the very best and the very smartest working with our children to make them the very best and the very smartest. Sadly, we too often hear of teachers who are working a second job just to pay their student loans, and that is not right. My plan calls for a maximum $3,000 annual award for teachers who teach each year of employment in a public school. It's not only the right thing to do, it is a retention benefit that will keep our teachers on the job. In addition to being an education-first administration, our team has always believed that mental health is just as important as physical health. And whether it's our students having to deal with bullying on social media, or impacts of a pandemic that none of us had lived through, or just the difficulties being a preteen or a teenager or a young adult, we know we have to do more for the social, emotional, and mental health services for our students. Any teacher, you know what, anybody in that building can tell you how important those services are. So once again, I'm proposing to set aside funds to assemble a statewide staff and create 8 regional social emotional learning institutes so educators have access to training on how to best help their kids cope with challenges that, listen, we never faced in school. I think back when somebody said something nasty about me in school and I thought everybody knew. Now with social media, they can say that nasty thing about you to billions of people. We'll be providing 2 new grant programs for school districts to provide wraparound services to students impacted by violence, substance abuse, child abuse, and parental incarceration, and other training resources as needed. Listen, the General Assembly's done some good work in the area of mental health. This is just another area where we can do that good work. And finally, I want to touch on what I believe that the General Assembly ought to consider. They would need to pull the data and the numbers. But what I believe is one of the single greatest things we could do to stop teachers from leaving our classrooms, and that's restoring pensions for our new teachers. I have always fought against cutting teachers' pensions. As Attorney General, I went to court for it, and we won. In March of 2021, I vetoed a bill by the General Assembly removing those pensions. Unfortunately, my veto was overridden. So currently, teachers are in a hybrid plan, which they're expected to pay more into retirement. But folks, you know a job is more than a salary. It's salary plus benefits. That is compensation. And by far the largest benefit available for our teachers was that pension. By cutting the pension, we basically cut the compensation of new teachers drastically. And we removed a retention benefit that kept people on the job for 20 or 30 years. They only earn that pension after decades of service to our kids and to the Commonwealth. Now is the time where we've got to realize we need to bring in new teachers, but we got to retain them too. And most teachers that we're losing, we lose in the first 5 years. This is something people can look forward to and work towards. And without student loan forgiveness and or pensions, there's simply no incentive to stay. Think about one tough day. Think about dealing with one tough situation. Our teachers have that weekly, if not more. And we've got to make sure that there is that extra impetus, that extra benefit that keeps people in that building working for decades after having that one rough day. With the revenues that we are seeing this year, there is more than enough funding for all the pieces that we've laid out today, including restoring teachers' pensions. In fact, during my administration, we fully funded our pension system, and we've even paid down the debt significantly. When you look at long-term costs, it makes much more sense now to hire a teacher and keep them 30 years than to lose one after 3 and go out and find another and lose that one after 2 and go out and find another, and on and on and on. So, I know our legislature would want to be thoughtful on this, but this is one they ought to be directly discussing, because that is a real way that we can ensure our teacher shortage is temporary and not long-term. The things we're talking about today are not red or blue issues. They're our children. They're my children. And today we're showing a united front about what must be done to confront learning loss. Next, you're going to hear from so many people who have dedicated their lives to education and make it their mission to do the very best for our students. As the father of 2 middle schoolers in our public school system, I want to let you know how grateful I am for the work of each of the individuals out here. And I believe that we can overcome any learning loss we've seen, but more than that, I believe that we can truly build the world-class education system that we thrive for. Over the last year and a half, we've become the electric vehicle battery capital of the United States of America and the agri-tech capital of the U.S. We know what we can do when we come together. We're shattering every economic development record we've ever seen. We're creating jobs all across the Commonwealth. We have more opportunity for these students if we get them in the right place than ever before. So now's the time to make sure we're realizing their potential and our potential. Scripture tells us, I alone know the plans I have for you, plans to bring about prosperity and not disaster, plans to bring about the future you hope for. Our time to invest in education is right here, and our children need it right now. Thank you all.
Thanks, Gov.
Thank you.
All right. It just occurred to me that the governor, you have a teenager and I have a three-nager, so we're really in this together.
And
but
some young adults.
And some young adults, right. So next up, we are going to hear from someone who is simply the best. I've known her longer than I've known anyone here, and I still butchered her name, so I apologize for that. But Lou Young needs no introduction. She's a teacher. She is a school administrator. She's been a superintendent, and now she is working to prepare the next generation of teachers here in Kentucky. And all of those reasons are why we chose her as the board chair of the Kentucky Board of Education. She is the best. So, Lou Young.
That's a good introduction. She is the best.
Lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a few remarks this morning on behalf of the Kentucky Board of Education. As you've heard, the latest round of test results, including the Kentucky Summative Assessment and the National Assessment for Educational Progress that the governor mentioned, have been in the news, and these results highlight what educators across Kentucky know and have been expecting, and that is that the impact of the pandemic on student learning is real and significant. But rather than wringing our hands this morning and viewing these results in educational testing as indicators of losses over the past 2 years, I'd like to reframe our thinking this morning around the notion that there's just learning left unfinished, and we will not give up. It is with this mindset that we can honor the heroic efforts of teachers throughout the pandemic while still directly addressing and accelerating learning opportunities as we move ahead. The pandemic punctuated the complexity of the student experience and helped to emphasize the multifaceted approach schools must take in order to meet the needs of the whole child, the social, emotional, physical, and academic needs of students that directly impact school success. With those aspirations in mind, the Kentucky Board of Education enthusiastically supports universal preschool, and we promote the whole child framework premised on the notion that every child deserves a healthy, safe, engaged, and academically challenging school experience. One of the key ideas of the Kentucky's bold new vision for learning and teaching in Kentucky that we call United We Learn is the infusion of vibrant student experiences across all classrooms. These experiences spark curiosity, motivation, and engagement, while instilling enthusiasm for lifelong learning in every one of our learners. The Kentucky Board of Education is committed to championing United We Learn as an effort to reimagine Kentucky teaching and learning. United We Learn was conceived 2 years ago when the Kentucky Department of Education interacted with more than 1,000 residents, including lots of family members and students. One thing we heard resoundingly time and again was people's desire to rethink how we measure school success beyond pencil paper tests. Such tests are important measures, necessary measures, but they're not sufficient to tell the whole story of the Kentucky student experience. So in order for this vision to be realized, Governor, we must support our teachers and administrators by providing them, as you said, with high-quality professional learning opportunities and instructional resources that support their efforts to design and assess these vibrant, meaningful learning experiences in relevant ways that meet the needs of kids, families, and communities. Additionally, we must strengthen our efforts to recruit the best and the brightest into the teaching profession to ensure that every student in Kentucky has access to outstanding teachers. If we learned one important lesson during the pandemic, it is this: Kentucky students, families, and educators are resilient, and they meet challenges head on. But we also learned that we must not take them for granted. We must provide them with the fiscal resources, the funding they need to meet post-pandemic academic, social, emotional, and wellness needs of Kentucky's children and youth as we move past the pandemic with grit and determination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Young. And next up, we have the Commissioner of Education here in Kentucky. Jason Glass assumed this position during the middle of a pandemic. And as much as that upended all of our lives, Dr. Glass took this opportunity to move Kentucky forward. We are so grateful for his leadership and the United We Learn mantra that he has adopted. So, Dr. Glass.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Like other states, Kentucky is facing significant challenges when it comes to the educator workforce. Since the 2015-16 school year, on average, 16.5% of all education positions posted on the Kentucky Employment Placement System go unfilled. And our number of emergency teaching certifications has been on the rise, which shows that our schools and districts are struggling to find enough properly credentialed educators to fill the openings that they have. One of the statistics that I find most troubling is that out of our current teacher workforce, 72% of them are at risk of leaving their job soon, meaning they fall into one of three categories of people who are most likely to depart the profession. These are educators with less than 5 years of experience, educators with more than 25 years of experience, and educators who've already left teaching once and returned. So 72% of our educators fall into one of those three categories. It should go without saying that we need the talent and professionalism of our educators to support students with the effects of unfinished learning that we see as a result of the pandemic, and that we need to support our educators in that effort. But our teachers just don't help Kentucky students with content. They provide emotional support to our students who are struggling. They are one of the first people to notice when a child may be having trouble at home, and can help connect our students and find access to the supports that they need. And there are so many stories, including my own, where teachers help students discover the passion in their lives that became a lifelong career. We didn't get into our teacher pipeline problems overnight, and similarly, solving these challenges is going to take a direct and multi-part effort that will take years of focused investment. There are many things that we can do and that we will need to keep doing to help reinvigorate the idea of teaching as being a viable and rewarding career. We must start addressing the fiscal reasons why our potential future teachers don't go into the profession, and why our current teachers leave earlier than we'd hoped. Talented people have options when it comes to career choices, so we have to work as a state to address the real labor market realities when it comes to total compensation. Teachers go into this field for altruistic reasons. They want to serve their communities. They want to work with young people and be connected to the future. But they also want a professional and livable wage. They want to have access to a middle-class life. They want to retire with dignity. And these are goals that are not too much to ask for those giving their lives to working in our schools. We need to attract people into the teaching profession who are willing to devote the years of their lives that it takes to master the art and science of teaching. This is not a job that everyone can or should do, and it needs to be celebrated and recognized. We also have to put a stop to the ongoing culture war when it comes to our educators, bringing national hyper-partisan issues into our schools, and laying blame on our educators is having a withering effect on educator morale and career longevity. We should all want some of the most talented people in our communities working in our schools and with our young people. And to do that, we have to start treating teaching professionals with the respect that they deserve. Helping our students recover from this pandemic and thrive, and addressing our educator workforce challenges that we had even before the pandemic will require collective action, dedication, and resources. And that's why I'm proud to stand here with Governor Beshear in calling for the meaningful supports and investments into the teaching profession. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this issue, and I look forward to continued work to make a difference for our Kentucky teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. And I'm reminded we're here to talk a lot about programs put into place and maybe some things that will cost us in terms of investments. but respecting our teachers does not cost us a thing, and that's really important to remember. So now I'm going to have Representative Rachel Roberts from Northern Kentucky come up here today. She is a phenomenal legislator that has a heart for service, and we appreciate that she is here today to stand in support of our public schools. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you all. Excuse me. Earlier in this year, I asked folks in my district to nominate people in the community for special recognition, people who were doing great things for others. And unsurprisingly, most of the nominees were people who work in our public schools, and most of them were nominated by their former students. When reading about those folks for recognition, one line was present in each of their nominations. They went above and beyond. And then I'd read about how this educator or community resource officer or coach made sure their students were fed and housed and felt safe and seen and had a trusted, consistent adult in their lives. And most of these stories took place before the pandemic hit, before we asked even more of them. One such nominee is Molly Wesley from Newport Independent Schools. Her nominator wrote, "She has worked in the Newport School District for 30+ years. She goes above and beyond for the children and families of our community. When I was in 4th grade, I met her, and she changed my life forever. She makes sure our children have food, clothes, Christmas, beds, help with utilities, housing, you name it. She has helped a child and their family through it." Then there was Cheryl Noonchester of Bellevue Independent Schools. Her nominator had this to say, "Cheryl and her husband Ronnie invite all students to try out for track, and they always manage to find an event for them, even when the athletes are not physically ready to run, jump, or throw. Cheryl and her team of coaches will work with them to find something they are comfortable doing. Every child finds a home and a family on the Bellevue track team." But here's the thing. Too many of our educators and public school staff have to go above and beyond their job descriptions because they have been asked to do too much with too little for far too long. No one gets into education for accolades or riches, but they should be able to enter the field knowing they will be treated with respect and appreciation, that they will have the tools they need to accomplish their mission of educating in their area of expertise, and that they will earn enough to support their own kids and their own families. I stand behind this podium today because of the talents and treasures I gained from my public school education. I believe, because it is my lived experience, that public schools are indeed the tide that can lift all ships, and that we must fight to ensure they are funded, supported, and appreciated. Thank you, Governor and Lieutenant Governor. Thank you all. Thank you to every educator, administrator, bus driver, crossing guard, cafeteria worker, custodian, coach, nurse, counselor, maintenance provider, and resource officer in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thank you.
All right, the job of a superintendent never ends. Superintendent Liggins got a call he had to take and likely won't be able to provide comments. I don't know what the call's on. But we're happy to open it up for questions on this. I will take any other questions of that Team Kentucky update because we're doing a 2-a-day today.
Governor, as it relates to universal preschool, what would it take to fund that? And do you worry that private preschool businesses might suffer as a result?
Oh, listen, we can work with anyone and everyone to make this happen. Right now, we have such a gulf in even having the spots, whether it is in private pre-K or child care. So if we are able to provide universal pre-K to all 4-year-olds, what we do is open up the ability to serve more 3-year-olds from the private sector, and right now there is the demand, but not the supply. This will help us get to that goal. The universal pre-K is $172 million a year. So think about it. We have over $1 billion surplus, the surplus being the dollars in addition to everything we agreed to pay for in the budget. For just 17% of this likely surplus, or the last one, or the one before, we can have every child kindergarten ready in Kentucky, and we can add about 10% of our maternal workforce. Those are folks that are out of the workforce because of young kids back into it. Anybody else? All right, thank you all very much.